Season 4 of Overwatch 2 is already here, and the reactions have been as mixed as a $19 box of Cadbury favorites. There are changes that are really good, features that aren't quite finished, and then there's things I've been asking for since before the Earth was engulfed in a world-altering pandemic. For now, however, we are going to talk about Lifeweaver, the new support that seems to be by far the biggest talking point of the season. Lifeweaver is the game's newest femboy, hailing from Thailand, and the first openly pansexual hero in the entire roster, which means if it walks on two legs, he'll probably want to fuck it.
I fuck loud, I fuck often, and I fuck with the door open.
The experience of playing Lifeweaver is so fucking strange, because although you barely have to aim to heal people, you still really have to work to keep up with a regular ass healer. On paper, Lifeweaver's healing output is downright embarrassing, but because of how stupid forgiving these charge-up projectiles are to aim, I'd expect most players will probably average out pretty close to other supports who require a bit more finesse. Most Overwatch creators are speaking for the top 1% of players, but as a degenerate plat scrub, I was almost always matching or out-healing my support partner in nearly every game I played. However, this comes with a big fucking catch, because these healing numbers were only if I was neglecting damage altogether. Perhaps the most reported and most valid complaint about Lifeweaver is that he actually has to swap between his healing and damage modes, and this causes some serious problems. The developers have been clear that they've tried to create a healer that plays much like Mercy, and that his weapon is more designed for emergency situations, and it's this design decision which seems to be sending mixed signals. Firstly, Mercy's healing is fucking instant, meaning you can often afford to quickly swap to deal some extra damage before returning to the honest life of a heal bot. However, for some godforsaken reason, Lifeweaver has to channel the spirits of his entire bloodline and wait for the healing projectile to make its way to the target before his healing can take effect. What this means in practice is that you're very discouraged from using his damage at all, because not only are you not going to be pumping out huge healing numbers anyway, but the opportunity cost of even attempting to deal damage will very often get a teammate killed. This was a hero obviously designed to only whip out his funny halo gun when absolutely necessary, but at the same time, his healing output is so low that it's actually faster to farm his ultimate by neglecting your team and just spamming damage. Weapon swapping as a concept is really fucking interesting, and if a damage hero could swap to a shotgun for example, I don't expect many players would be very bothered, but when swapping severely hurts your team to this extent, it could probably be done better. The devs have already stated that they are looking into ways to address this, and people have already used workshop tools to remap his kit, so hopefully Lifeweaver will be more refined going into the future. With all of this in mind, no one is going to be playing Lifeweaver for either his healing or damage, as he's now the king of utility. I've been advocating for fucking years for Symmetra to be reworked into the support category, and with the release of Lifeweaver, I've pretty much gotten my wish. Lifeweaver's coolest ability will shield a teammate and drag them to your position, which can essentially save anyone from certain death. The number of fucking times I've seen players survive their own funeral is fucking incredible, and people with cracked game sense are going to be single-handedly saving games with this ability alone. If a baby diva is getting stalled out, you can just pull her back to safety, and if a Junkrat tire catches out your other support, you can actually keep your team in the fight a little while longer. This shit is so fucking good that if you're in mortal danger, you can literally summon your tank to peel for you, and as long as Reinhardt mains have something to swing at, they don't usually care where you decide to drag them. It's a symbiotic relationship in its purest form. Before the season was out, there were a fuck ton of people very worried that this ability might be used to troll teammates, but those concerns have been dramatically overstated. This shit is on a 20-second cooldown, meaning no support worth their salt wants to waste this shit unless they feel it absolutely necessary. From what I can tell, Lifeweavers only tend to use the pull if they are certain that the healing isn't going to be enough to keep someone alive, and from nearly every single time I was on the receiving end, I was almost always happier to be out of the shit show of a situation I found myself in. There was admittedly one distinct situation which cost us the game, but it seemed as more of a well-intentioned attempt to save my life, as opposed to a purposeful decision to troll the team. 3 years ago, I actually came up with an ability very similar, but instead of pulling an enemy to your position at will, it would only come into effect if they took fatal damage over the next few seconds. Obviously when I saw this new ability for the first time, I thought my idea was better, but after playing with this for a decent amount of time, I'm happy to stand corrected. Players who want to troll can literally just throw themselves off the map until the end of time, and I don't think a single ability is going to turn perfectly good players into professional full-time trolls. His other abilities are a small dash, which gives him a modest burst of healing, and an elevator that can move around both teammates and enemy players. People don't seem to have fully come to realize the full potential of these movement utilities, but I expect pro games are going to be fucking nuts with fully coordinated teams. At the moment, these are mostly to help his own survival, but we'll get to that in a minute. Lifeweaver's ultimate lets him plant the tree from Elden Ring, a deployable that gives healing to nearby teammates, and it's probably the least impactful support ability currently in the game. The tree will rarely let you survive big ultimates that are coming your way, but it seems to be more of a temporary supplement to your own lack of healing. The tree itself is tangible, meaning you can use it as a budget May wall for some cheeky plays, but in terms of raw power, I'd still rather anything else from the support roster. Lifeweaver might be all about sunshine and flowers, but the experience of playing him certainly doesn't match his exterior. This guy is fucking enormous, has pretty scuffed mobility options, and has very limited self-healing, which means he's now target number 1 for flankers. In a cruel twist of irony, he can save every other member of his team from being dived, but as soon as someone gets up in his face, his horny twink ass is shit out of luck. People have already figured out that Winston fucking deletes this man, but when they learn about Sombra, they are going to lose their fucking shit. Sombra's EMP can wipe Lifeweaver's tree from existence. Her hack can destroy his elevator in a second, and assassinating targets is literally her entire job. Lifeweaver is just a 200 HP enormous hitbox that needs to fumble with his weapon swap to even start dealing damage, and I expect Sombra is going to absolutely eat him alive. With this in mind, Sombra isn't the only big winner in season 4, with Brigitte getting her ultimate rework to give her more health, a bigger shield, and to temporarily have the ability to stun with her bash. There were players saying that this change would revert Brigitte to her insane former power, but these people are very much wrong. The shield bash is certainly a nice addition, but at the very most, she gets to attempt this stun twice every time she uses her ultimate. Her shield is only slightly better than it was at launch, and because it's so big, it gets melted faster than an ice cream in the Arabian desert. People are complaining that Brig's ultimate is being able to revert herself to her launch state for 10 whole seconds, and that in itself is fucking hilarious. The developers have long struggled with the support role, even before the game was released, and it's clear that it's only up until recently that they've started to remedy some of these early problems. When Overwatch was in development, and when role queue was still years away, they had expected that most teams would run a mix of 4 damage dealers, 1 tank, and 1 healer, and they planned their lopsided roster around this assumption, launching with a choice of only 3 healers. When the game released, however, players would quickly figure out that a mix of 2 heroes per role would usually be the optimal strategy, and this would kickstart a catch-up effort, which has been spanning 7 long years. It was only recently when the developers would publicly state that supports will be making up half the new releases until they can get the roster leveled out, and I think now is when we should talk about what might become the game's newest problem. With the addition of this utility support, it calls into question whether the raw healing output of any 2 supports will be enough to sustain the average team. This might be my plat brain taking over, or just PTSD from a time where only 2 healers were even viable, but I'd argue that supports should be balanced in such a way where players can pick a combination of any 2 from the roster and expect to be able to reasonably keep their teammates alive. I expect most players have heard the words, "Can we get an actual healer?" And although this likely says a lot about the person saying it, it also says a lot about what might end up happening. There's a difference between players being bad at a particular character and a character simply not having the raw output to be deemed worthwhile to the player base at large, and if the developers truly want to expand the roster, it should remain just as important to keep the current pool of viable heroes as wide as possible. After all, having 50 supports wouldn't even matter if only 5 were seen to be worth using. And if the Overwatch team truly want to move the game away from counter picks, like they've previously stated, it's going to be important to make sure that each hero can reasonably perform their job. Despite his clunky controls, lackluster raw stats, and his tank-sized hitbox, Lifeweaver is still my favorite support in years, which isn't exactly saying much considering the rate of releases, but this still doesn't change the sentiment. For better or worse, the Overwatch developers have become very good at creating heroes that are increasingly more engaging and fun to play, but we can only hope that they can maintain the integrity of the entire system to keep up with this relatively rapid rate of new content. 8 out of 10 pretty good season.